Okay, hello and welcome. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com, and thanks for joining us for today's event on improving business performance with enhanced time tracking for Microsoft Dynamics ERP. Today we're joined by two experts on the subject from Jernix, Director of Product Management Meredith Zacharitz and Director of Sales Brian Maxon. Today, to get this event started, please know that we do invite you in the audience to add your feedback and ask questions. During the presentation, you can use the Q&A panel that you should see to the right of the main presentation window to ask your questions. They will leave time at the end. And we wanted to start off today with a very quick poll just to give our speakers a better sense of who is in the audience and what their interests are. I'm going to open that up right now, and we'll leave that up for just a few seconds as we get started. And to do that, I'm going to now hand it off to our first speaker, Meredith Zacharitz.
Thanks, Jason. Hello, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us. As Jason said, my name is Meredith Zacharitz, and I'll be doing the first part of our presentation today, and then I'll hand the presentation over to Brian Maxon, who will show us a little bit of the concepts in practice. Jernix is an ISV that specializes in enterprise time solutions for Dynamics, so that's our background, and we'll be talking about some of the important components of a time entry solution to improve the data that you get out of your Dynamics system. All right. So, seeing as you're here today for this particular webcast, you may have already decided that you need to track time for your organization, whether you're just getting started with a new initiative or you're maybe retooling a long-standing timesheet process. It's worth looking at why you want to track time and what you want to do with that data. Determining what you want to do with the data and the priority that you assign to each use is going to help you to focus your efforts on selecting and implementing the best solution for you. Now, in today's environment of largely project-based workforce, most people need to track time for project work. They need the work information to maybe plan timelines and also make team assignments, and then they move on to tracking status and making sure they're delivering on time. It may also be monitoring budgets and costs at the same time. The work data gives them the information they need to plan effectively, adjust quickly when projects are either running late or over budget. Now, in addition to the project focus for tracking time, companies also need to, of course, pay their employees and get paid by their customers. That's kind of one of the key components of business. So time data provides the basis for running payroll and invoicing for billable work. And it can also provide an audit trail for verifying the amounts billed to your customers. Now, as I said, there are many uses for time data. Then we also have an area that is often difficult to manage, leave and paid time off. And they're an essential component of anybody who's filling out a timesheet. Leave requests are reviewed and approved in conjunction with that scheduled project work, and then employees have to track the amount of paid time off that they're taken against, say, accrual balances that indicate how much time they have. Now, for some types of employees, there may also be a concept of units completed as part of the time tracking process. So in addition to the amount of time spent working on specific projects or jobs, they may also be measuring how many units were completed and use that data to calculate averages for unit completion. Now, any time entry solution that you might select is part of a bigger picture. The time data has to be used to automate manual processes and make better decisions in order for that data to be of any value. The data in your time entry system must match up with your other critical business systems and must flow smoothly through to those systems for automation and analysis. When a Dynamics ERP solution is one of those critical business systems, you want to be sure that your time entry solution can use that Dynamics data as set up for time tracking. So you should be able to pull over the project lists, project access, applicable cost categories, and all of that other tracking data related to billing and pay from your Dynamics system. So there should be no need to recreate the existing data in yet another system. Now, while your time entry system should be linked up to Dynamics for making sure that that data passes smoothly back and forth, your employees and end users don't need to worry about this. They need one place to input all of their data quickly and easily. They should be able to enter their information using the method of their choice without requiring IT and some sort of complicated setup process. So a simple login via browser or mobile should be all that they really need to start entering, checking, and approving that time data. Now, after that data is confirmed as accurate and approved, it also needs to be easy to send it back to your Dynamics system, so that there you can use it to analyze project costs, automate payroll, manage invoices, and many other tasks. Now, for today's webcast, we're focusing on 3 areas where time tracking can improve your business performance: improved efficiency, management of strategic approvals, and automation of compliance. We'll start with the one that's probably the most obvious. Any time tracking process and the system that will come with it should improve efficiency of your operations. That's really many times the point of instituting this process. Even if your organization has never tracked time, the information that comes from doing so should lead to decisions and changes that make your company perform more effectively. So we usually start with knowing what your people are working on, and this is key to understanding how you can work smarter. You can't plan effectively or analyze past performance if you aren't tracking what you're doing right now. So if your people are able to access the projects they're supposed to be working on, the things that they're assigned to do, and they can get their time entered quickly and accurately, it provides a basis for that future planning and estimation. It also allows you to report on real-time project status and make adjustments as necessary. Part of making time entry efficient includes reducing the opportunities for end users to make mistakes. So employees need to see the jobs and selections that apply to them and nothing else. Likewise, they should only see options that apply to specific projects they are working on. So selections, the bill status, the pay type, all of that should be tied to what they select, and it shouldn't be easy to select things that would be incorrect in any way. Your time system can also improve efficiency by supplying you with the information you need to schedule work. In addition to, say, an employee's general availability based on, their typical working hours or standard overhead allocation time, you should also be able to plan based on anticipated employee leave, whether it's approved vacation time or standard company holidays. With your history of work time data and time off schedules, you can then truly optimize your capacity to do work and allocate your resources effectively. Another component of a time tracking solution that can improve business performance involves management of approval processes. And it is a process that needs quite a bit of management. All that automation and decision making can only be effective if the data that you feed into it is correct. So review and approval of your time data is key to attaining that accuracy. Now, the corrections process for timesheets is really one of the biggest headaches for departments that use the time data to automate payroll, billing, project accounting. Many of our customers come to us because they want to reduce the amount of time that they spend on that corrections process and everything that rolls out from it. A good time tracking system should reduce the number of errors that get through that process. Ideally, it should catch these errors before anyone has to review and reject the timesheet and correct the timesheet and so on. So you really need a good approval process that presents the reviewers with timesheets that have already been checked for basic time entry rules. Now, along with error checking, you need your system to enforce approval workflows that make sure that all of the appropriate people review that time information. So in addition to the standard supervisors and management who may be looking at employee timesheets, based on a department, you may also have project or contract managers who may need to review specific line items on timesheets, perhaps based on the project the time was logged to. And it should be easy to design and set up those workflows to ensure the correct people to see the time and sign off on it. Once the proper workflows are in place, Your system should also assist those who are doing the approving. It should provide reminders and tools that help the approvers to see the status of the timesheet in their approval queues, maybe remind them when they are running late, and basically do everything that they need to allow them to complete their approvals on time for what is often, say, like a period closeout before they start the automation of other processes. So ensuring that all approvals are completed before the time data is used elsewhere guarantees accurate data for automation and analysis. The last key component of a time tracking system is automating compliance. If end users are not getting that data into the system and managers aren't approving the data, you can't do anything with the information. Now, it's pretty well known no one likes to track their time. So you really need a system that makes it painless, just as quick and easy as possible. And so part of what your system can do is automatically send reminders and late notices based on the status of timesheets so that end users don't necessarily have to keep track of the status of their timesheets themselves. They've got reminders that help them, whether daily or at the end of a period, but various ways that you can set up your system to help your end users remember to fill out their timesheets. It also needs to give your end users a variety of tools to enter their time quickly, and an example is where you could reuse your entries from your previous timesheets. But really it needs to be flexible in the types of tools that it provides because each group may enter their time a little differently, and so they should have a tool or tools specific to the way they use the system that allows them to get their timesheets completed quickly and painlessly. Now, as we've mentioned previously today, it also has to be easy to use because the configuration of the system makes it difficult or impossible, hopefully impossible, to enter their time incorrectly. And it also has to provide tools that assist the approvers in managing the review process. So part of compliance is making sure that we don't force our users to make lots of corrections and that we don't force our approvers to constantly reject and review so that that process becomes so time-consuming they don't want to use the system. And with all of these features in place, compliance becomes much easier. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and switch gears, and we'll take a look at how time entry systems can be used to achieve the goals that we've just reviewed. Brian is going to walk us through how some of these concepts work in practice.
So as Meredith mentioned, and I'm sure everybody on this call knows, nobody really likes to track time. So if it's not easy, if it's not simple, then it won't be as accurate as you need it to be able to do those things like project costing, billing your customers, or paying your employees. So a good time tracking system, first of all, needs to be very simple for the end user. And so what you want to be able to do is give them some tools so that it takes a lot of the decisions out of their hands on what they need to be able to do. So obviously you'd want to restrict the different projects or cost categories that somebody has access to so they're not making invalid time entries. You also want to be able to put different rules in place, maybe, for example, that require them to put in either minimum or maximum amount of hours in a day, or that they can only limit their selections to certain things that you want them to have access to. For example, there's a select one option here, and really what this allows them to do is it sort of forces them to pick the appropriate items from drop-down menus. If I was to try to record time against this option, then a good time tracking system will have in place where you can force you to actually pick that from the drop-down menu instead of having just the select one option. You can see it, a nice warning message for the employee that requires them to actually pick something from the drop-down menu. You can also see that we've got different data validation rules, and the idea again is to really cut down on the mistakes that employees can do when they're doing time entry, and that really helps cut down on all of the back-end correction process that your payroll or your accounting staff has to do so that you can make sure the data is accurate before you send that over to your ERP system. But again, keeping it very simple, the basic concept is people can pick what they want to record their time against. They can save that time as they go. A good time tracking system, as Meredith mentioned also, should give you the ability to add additional features that keep things simple. For example, creating memorized time entries for those things that people do on a pretty regular basis. You don't want them to have to go in and pick from drop-down menus every single time they make an entry if they work on certain things on a pretty regular basis. So a good time tracking system should have sort of a carryover methodology or a memorized drop-down menu selection capability to try to make that as simple as possible for the employee. Now, in addition to keeping things very simple so that your data will be accurate, you also want to be able to give your employees the ability to capture all of their types of time in one system. You don't want them to have to be able to track their time off in one method and their project time in a different method. You want to give them one simple user interface for doing all of that. So in addition to being able to capture project time, cost categories, you want them to be able to capture, time out of the office, sick day, vacation, PTO, however you might classify that. Now, in addition to just recording time against that, you want a system that's going to be able to easily calculate and display those balances as well, so that they don't have to come bug HR for their balance. They don't have to wait for their pay stub to be able to see what their balance is. It should give them that balance in real time, so they've got the information that they need right in front of them. Along the same lines of tracking time off, a good system should allow them to do what we call a leave request, or request time off in advance. This not only simplifies that entry process for the employee, it allows you to have a workflow process around time off. It also allows your managers to be able to, through one system, know the availability of their employees, which further lends to the ability to checking resource capacity and availability to work on projects. So it's important that you've got all of these types of data elements in one simple user interface for the employee, so that the data that they enter will be accurate. It'll be easy, so they'll actually do it, hopefully on time. That way you can make all the important business decisions that you need to do around time entry for cost accounting, billing, and paying your employees. Another good time entry system should have the capability of incorporating any of your sort of state or local rules around time entry. So, for example, California has some unique overtime calculations. A good time entry system will have those overtime calculations built into it, so that when you go to process that data from the back end and send that over to your ERP system, you don't have to worry about calculating all those on the back end. You also don't want to have to put that into the hands of the employee, where they're trying to pick regular time versus overtime. You want the system to be able to allow them to enter just their work hours, and then the system make those calculations for you. So any good time entry system should be able to accommodate all of those different overtime rules and all the regulatory things around paying people, so that you don't have to add that manual burden either to your users or to your administrative staff. Once the timesheet is complete, the employees have the ability to submit the timesheet through a workflow process. A good time entry system, as Meredith mentioned, should allow you to remind employees to be able to put their time in on time via email notification and reminders. You should be able to let managers know when things have been submitted for their review. You should be able to allow managers to know when people are late, so they need to know who they need to go chase down for timesheet compliance, so that your administrative staff can not be burdened with having to chase people down when they need that time entry data in the system for sending over to the ERP system. So you can submit that for approval. There's an optional confirmation. It locks down the timesheet for the user at that point in time, just so that the employee is not making changes after you've processed that data. Now, if for some reason you make a mistake and need to have that changed, then a good time entry system will allow you to either reopen that or reject that back to the end user so they can make appropriate changes and then resubmit that for approval. Now, in addition to time entry, another thing that is very interesting around the same concept is being able to track sort of the completion of maybe the number of widgets or items that have been complete that are also related. So a good time entry system is going to give you the flexibility to capture not only the hours, but the other things that are related to the time that they've worked, the completion of number of widgets or the amount of time or effort they might travel on a piece of equipment. And all of those things help contribute to the overall cost of a project or what you might invoice to a customer and maybe even help pay and reimburse your employees. Now, in keeping with the same concept of a workflow process, a good time tracking system should have you give you the flexibility that you need to be able to do multiple types of workflow approval, whether it be a sheet-based approval process where managers are approving the entire sheet regardless of the projects that have been worked on. But also, as Meredith mentioned, you might have project managers or client managers that need to do approval, but you don't want to give them visibility to other projects or other customers that you might be working for. So a good time tracking system will give you the ability to have flexibility to have both sheet-based approvals and project-based approvals, all within the same workflow, all within the same timesheet. And again, with the flexibility to have all of the different reminders and emails in place so that you can really improve the efficiency of the workflow process. Now, I know that everybody on the call probably has the same problem where nobody really does their timesheets on time, and you really need that time to be in a timely fashion because you need to be able to bill your customers and pay your employees and measure the cost on your projects. So a good time tracking system is also going to give you the ability to sort of view the compliance of your time entry process. So basically provided with a sort of a hierarchical structure within your organization where managers can see all the people that submit their time to them for approval, and you can make sure that timesheets are in the proper state, whether they've been approved or in a submitted state. The idea here is you want to make sure that all of your timesheets are entered on time, they've been reviewed by a manager, everything has been approved so that when you send your data over to your accounting system, you're not having to make a lot of manual changes and corrections within that application. Meredith also mentioned having the ability to have a bi-directional integration with your accounting system. A lot of people, sort of a best practice is that project data, people, cost categories, that typically will flow in on maybe a nightly basis, multiple times a day, just really depending on how real-time your users need to have access to that project data. But when you're going to send that data back out to the accounting system, that's where typically you'll have more of a manual process where you're getting a set of eyes on that information, making sure everything looks accurate before you send that information back over to your accounting system, again, so that you're not having to do a lot of manipulation and corrections within that application. So again, the main things that a good time tracking system should have in place is that it should be very simple for the end users to enter time because nobody likes to do it and it won't be accurate if it's not. You want to be able to cut down on some of the errors that they could potentially come across. So a good data entry validation system is very important in a good time tracking system so that it can help capture a lot of those mistakes on the front end. You want them to be able to just enter all of their types of time in one system, time on projects, time out of the office, leave requests, all in one simple user interface. And you want to be able to be in line with all of your different compliance, whether it be state or local rules. Would that be overtime calculations, or anything related to any sort of regulatory thing that you might have to consider when you're doing time entry. At this point, I will go ahead and flip over to our final screen here, and I guess if we've got questions that anybody has, this would be a good time for us to have that question and answer session.
All right, thanks, Brian. So to everyone in the audience, yeah, please do enter your questions into the box marked Q&A. We have some time here to take and hear about your scenarios, hear about your questions, your challenges. Brian and Meredith would both be happy to take those. And before we get into the questions here, I also want to remind folks we do have a survey that we always put up after sessions. So at the end of today's session, I just want to put that in your mind to be on the lookout for a quick pop-up that will show up later on. We really appreciate that feedback. Our speakers always do as well. First question that came in here, guys, do you have any use, do you have to use a project accounting module in GP to use Jernix?
Sure, that's a common question, and the answer is no, but we have integrations that work both ways. So if you do use the project accounting module, then we have an integration that pulls, or our integration technology pulls from project accounting. If you are not using a project accounting, then we work with the general ledger. So it's just all dependent upon which configuration you use. But if you have the additional data of the project accounting module, then we can handle that. And if you don't, then we'll do the basic general ledger integration.
All right, a question here whether Jernix is meant to be utilized in a factory type of environment.
Sure, and that's a good question, and it really kind of depends on you know, what, if we're talking, you know, shift and differentials and punching in and out, that sort of factory type environment, then a lot of times what we do is team up with some of the people who do the attendance hardware to handle that kind of situation. But it really depends on there are certainly manufacturers who use it, but they tend to be closer to that idea of the, you know, the widget-based tracking, and not so detailed on the punch in, punch out, shift differential side of things. But they do use it for equipment utilization and widget tracking in some of these environments. So it's possible that if that's your primary use is, like I said, the punch in, punch out type of environment, then it would be something we would do in conjunction with somebody else.
All right. Another question here: can we have resource costing integrated to time tracking, integrated to the time tracking module for consultancies?
Sure. So Brian kind of gave an overview of some of the ways that time entry systems can, you know, handle some of these components that we talked about today. But yeah, certainly if you want, so people will often start out doing project costing just at the project level when they are getting started, but as their process improves and sort of matures, then they want to start looking at the costs at the resource level. So absolutely, if you are one of those people who is costing down to the resource level and you're allocating resources based on costs, you know, and making decisions, you know, on capacity based on that resource cost, then you'll want to look for a time tracking system that includes that sort of capability. And that is a pretty standard option in the best time entry system. So absolutely you should be tracking costs down to the resource or integrated resource costs if that's something that you're ready to do.
All right. Do you handle California overtime rules?
Yes, we pretty much handle any type of overtime rule, but the important thing to emphasize there is that it's not through the actual employee entering time. So they enter their time, and we take that information on the back end, and we process it. And so calculating the California overtime is basically part of the processing. So the employees will have certain time entry rules that apply to them that they'll see as they enter their time, and it will make sure that they get their time entered accurately. But then there are rules on the back end, such as rules for payroll processing, where we can mark up that time and enforce rules based on the patterns of time entry. So that's how California overtime and any other sort of leave and special leave and overtime rules are handled on the back end when we're ready to send that data to your Dynamics system.
All right, great. We have one last question at the moment, so I'll make a final call to the folks in the audience to get your questions in now. And here's that last question: is the integration of with Dynamics real time?
And I'll answer that yes and no. The type of data that you track in your time entry system is not something that you want to, for example, when an employee saves a new entry, you do not want that going directly to your Dynamics system. So that's something that you want to manage. So it can be as real time as you'd like it to be, but it is something that requires some management, because it ideally will go through an approval process and and all of that before it gets sent over. So it's really up to you to decide how frequently you update the systems, both directions. So obviously, it's something that you push a button to initially populate that time entry system, but then you want to be able to keep the systems in sync, but generally on some kind of schedule. So it's not uncommon, for example, to have your time entry system update with new projects or employees or anything coming in from your Dynamics system, say nightly when nobody's on the system, and so you can quickly get that information in for use the next day. Then from the time entry system perspective, like I said, you generally want that time to be approved for a period so that it's accurate before it gets back to your Dynamics system. So again, this can be a type of scheduled process, but essentially you schedule that process to run when you have finished your approval schedule for a particular period. So you should be able to certainly automate it, but like I said, real time, it is real time once it's complete.
All right. Well, thanks for the questions, everyone. That is the end of our queue, and we'll start wrapping up here. We have recorded today's session. We'll be making that available on demand soon. I want to thank Meredith and Brian for taking the time to present to us today. And
Thank you, Jason.
thanks to everyone in the audience. We will wrap it up there. Have a great day.